In 2015, the web turned dark. There was a proliferation of all kinds of weird, extreme movements and groups, incels, men's rights activists on Reddit, 4chan, Pepe the Frog, Nazi memes, and this brought a lot of scholars and journalists to the problem of kind of reactionary turn or malignant turn in what had previously been seen as participatory web culture, something that had been theorized in very different terms. So this evening's event bring a bunch of these people together from very different perspectives, from the perspective of journalism, from the perspective of the arts, and from the perspective of new media in academia. And we're going to discuss this problem of radicalization from a basically new media perspective. In new media, we think the way that we look at things is in terms of the media, and the media that is the sort of substrate within which a culture would grow, like a petri dish in which a kind of a bacteria could grow. And so that's how we want to think about this. And the scholars this evening will be, who will be joining us are Richard Rogers from the University of Amsterdam, the founder of the Digital Methods Initiative, and a web epistemologist. Dimitri Tokmetzis, a notable expert in extremism online, and a journalist with the Correspondent, very important independent news organization. Florian Cramer, who is a kind of a long-time public intellectual figure in the arts at the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam, and Bharat Ganesh from the Groningen University, an assistant professor in new media. So please join us for this fantastic event.
I think it's hard to say really why it is conspiracy theories are so kind of central in the internet landscape today. I think there's probably a couple ways to think about this. I think the first one is because the internet enables anybody to go out and publish something or publish their own voice, right? It makes it easy to put out conspiracy theories, right? So I think that's the first part of it, right? So especially when we look at social media platforms like YouTube or Twitter, the fact that they're really centered around user-generated content, there's so few kinds of filters that are there to prevent some kind of nonsense theories, for example. I think that's a big reason why we see so much conspiracy theories on the internet. But that's not to say, there were a lot of conspiracy theories before that. But I think the internet is also making them a lot more accessible. So I think that's one of the key aspects about conspiracy theory. But also I think, we also have to think about the times that we're living in, the kind of uncertainty and the challenges that so many people have. Finding conspiracy theories on the internet might help people to confirm certain kinds of existing emotions or beliefs that they have. And that might also play a big role. But I don't think there's a definitive answer to this question about whether or not or what it is that makes conspiracy theories so effective online.
That's a good question, because for every niche there's a massive audience. I think that's the case. And internet loves niches. So it's so easy to find people who think the same way as you do on the internet. What strikes me more, I'm not surprised that there are so many conspiracy theories going around and that some platforms are so conducive to them. But what surprises me is that those conspiracy theories actually escape and make it into the real world. Like Pizzagate, of course, is one of the infamous cases where the conspiracy theory is this is pizza joint in Washington, and the Democratic establishment is sacrificing children, and they're killing them and burying them in the cellar, which is complete bonkers, of course. But one guy actually believed it with so much passion that he went with his automatic rifle to this place and demanded that the children would be freed. So that's kind of disturbing. And there's a conspiracy theory, I think it was in 2016, 2017, and now it's re-emerging again on TikTok. So it has been debunked so many times. There's so much information available about not being true and it's just being a big crap, and still it resurfaces. It's just amazing.
Well, you could say that conspiracy theory always has to do with networks. It's creating a semantic network. It's connecting the nodes, and it's also, most importantly, connecting the things that are not connected. It's connecting the loose ends. That's what conspiracy theories really are about. So when you're mapping a conspiracy theory, you can almost map it, or actually exactly map it like a network map, where you see, what is its routers, what are its servers, what are the peer-to-peer structures, etc., etc. So, yeah, you could say if you would make a linguistic or semiotic analysis of conspiracy theories, then you would end up with network structures, and that's why the internet is the perfect medium for conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories have been on the web for many, many years. Since the early 1990s, the web was oftentimes called this space of rumor mongers, of self-publishers. So there's nothing new there, but what is new is that they are now being sort of supercharged by social media, and they're being circulated a lot more, and thereby, in some ways, the fringe is being mainstreamed.
I would say maybe not so much or less than we think in qualitative terms. If you think, for example, of classic conspiracy theories like the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories of the wise men of Zion, it's practically unchanged. Also has been perfectly transported into the internet. Conspiracy theories can be rehashed, and you see that most of them are not very new. Even if you look at a very contemporary, seemingly new conspiracy theory like QAnon, then you see it's just all elements from pre-internet times, even including Q itself, because Q was actually a novel written by an Italian collective, the Luther Blissett collective, in the late 1990s. And the inventors of the QAnon conspiracy theory literally just ripped this novel and repurposed it for a pro-Trump conspiracy theory. So that is maybe also the weak point of it. You could say the internet has mostly been something like an incubator and an accelerator. Because it has that web structure, because it lends itself to these kind of narratives, you could say there has been a new quantitative quality in conspiracy theories. The quality hasn't that much improved.
I mean, I really don't know too much about this particular point, so I can kind of speculate, I guess. So what makes conspiracy theories different in the context of the internet? I think one thing that's really probably worth picking up on here when we're trying to think about what it is that's special about conspiracy theories online is we've got these big participatory spaces for people to go out and kind of find that information from a particular conspiracy theory online, right? So what we see with the QAnon folks is they're trying to go out and find all kinds of evidence for the conspiracy theories that they believe in. But it also connects with some of my own research on the alt-right. So the idea that white people are victims in Western countries, right? They are really active. A lot of these alt-right accounts on social media platforms are really active in going out and trying to seek information to sort of prove their existing beliefs or their existing kind of dispositions.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, what has changed now is that we are in a period of time where we've experienced not only the rise of populism and a kind of turn to the right on the web, but these turns have been accompanied with a kind of a new sort of information environment where you have a lot more alternative sources, a lot more alternative views, and many of these you could consider to be conspiracy theories.
Yeah, of course, especially in the right-wing sphere. There's this strange marriage between right-wing extremists and conspiracy thinkers, I think, and the anti-vaccination movement. You sometimes see them together, and right now, for instance, in the Netherlands with the corona crisis, the lockdown is being eased, and there has been some demonstrations of people thinking that we should ease the lockdown even more, and it's not going fast enough. And that's a strange marriage between right-wing activists and anti-vax people, and some other people, of course. They're not all part of this movement, but they know how to find each other. Another one, of course, is a more pernicious one. That's the idea of, how do you call it in English? In Dutch you call it omvolking. It's a theory that the EU, the European Union, is set on basically wiping out the European population, the original white population, by stimulating immigration and therefore making it possible that the white race, as they see it, will disappear. That's clearly a conspiracy theory, but that's a conspiracy theory you actually hear parliamentarians say now, and you see it in mainstream media emerging sometimes. And that's really scary, I think. It's really potent.
Well, of course, the current president of the United States is one of the better known conspiracy theorists. It was a person who spread the birther conspiracy theory around Obama, for example, and is an active spreader or circulator of conspiracy theories through his Twitter account. So it goes right to the top at the moment. But you also have other politicians, largely on the right, largely populist ones, who peddle in this kind of information, some far more than others, but it is not unusual nowadays, whereas I guess you would have thought it to be rather unusual in the past, to see politicians peddling these sorts of views.
Yeah, I think the new quality really is that online conspiracy theories influence the political landscape. Just today, it was on the news that 2 Republican candidates have been chosen in the USA who are supporters of the QAnon conspiracy theory. So what we get is a kind of breakdown of, let's say, the realm of fiction for conspiracy theories, which but then is not such a new thing. I mean, mainly historically, we could say that conspiracy theories were mainly political, roughly from the late 19th century to fascism, where there are also political tools. And then we had, after the Second World War, a dominance of conspiracy theories in counterculture as something that's more fictitious. Let's think of Thomas Pynchon or Robert Anton Wilson. That would be very typical, but also of popular movies, comic books. V for Vendetta, for example, would be a good example. The Matrix, etc. But what we have seen in the last couple of years is that they regain this political dynamics. So when we thought we were already beyond the stage of the protocols of the wise men of Zion, they're now back with full force.
Conspiracy theorists, I think, have a relatively, especially in the last few years, a relatively prominent position in sort of the political landscape. So, you know, I mean, the first thing that kind of comes to mind here is Alex Jones, right? As sort of one of the most infamous conspiracy theorists of our time. And I think one of the things that characters like him are quite good at doing is sort of challenging the sort of mainstream narratives that you might get from what he might refer to as the establishment media, or what you might get from kind of professionalized journalism sources. And I think sort of part of how it affects the political landscape is by injecting nonsense and conspiracies, as well as kind of all kinds of questionable and junk information into our political landscape. That's part of it. But I think the other part of it is really about kind of creating a space for rejecting what most people hold to be true, to be able to say, I am some kind of transgressive person that understands a truth that all of you don't. And I think that's also a really important part of how that affects the political landscape. It helps generate a certain kind of righteousness, I think, for the people that might believe in or are trying to seek truth in these conspiracy theories.
And I mean, folklorists see conspiracy theories as being ways of processing different kinds of sort of what's now called data voids or lack of information, these sorts of things. And in some sense, also rumors, similarly, are ways in which one sort of, kind of deals with different kinds of information gaps, or so I think that there are many conspiracy theories which you could call harmless. You could also think of them as being in some ways, society's way of dealing with these sort of information voids. But of course, there are others which are quite unhealthy, and you see a lot of rather unhealthy conspiracy theories circulating these days around COVID. And some of these, for example, connecting 5G technology as a transmitter of COVID, these can be quite racist, or so there's or xenophobic or anti-Chinese. So these could be considered rather unhealthy indeed.
I think all of them are dangerous in their own way, but some are more problematic than others, or some are much riskier than others, right? So when you've got conspiracy theories that are really about kind of creating conspiracies about particular groups of people, right, which has been going on for centuries in Western societies, that's really harmful because people go and act on that. So it's at that point that I think we need to be really serious about certain conspiracy theories, right? Is this like the Eurabia conspiracy theory, this nonsense idea that Muslims are migrating to Europe in order to take over the continent, right? This is a very well-worn conspiracy theory in the United States and in Europe, as well as the rest of North America. And the problem there is that it gives political impetus, and it can even give political credibility to racist programs and racist projects. So it's when they're being used in the service of racism or misogyny or hatred towards people with non-binary sexual identities, that's when we really need to step in, right? Yeah, it is probably a little dangerous that there's a conspiracy theory about what happened in 9/11, right? But the conspiracy theories that create harms on individual people and on groups that we in a democratic society believe that need protection, that's when I think we really need to draw the line with conspiracy theory.
Of course, and contrary to what people think, I don't think that conspiracy theories are illogical. There is some logic behind them. There's the people behind them are passionate, and they truly want to change the conversation and truly want to find the truth. And that should be something that's quite pleasing in a sense, that they want them, that they have this drive for truth. The downside, of course, is that the ways they are doing that is flawed. And flawed in the sense that it becomes kind of a belief system that doesn't permit any other logical analysis anymore.
I absolutely do not see conspiracy theories as something negative. Maybe we should go a little bit into the history of the term. The term was actually coined by Karl Popper liberal philosopher, rationalist philosopher, and as part of his rationalist philosophy, he of course wanted to debunk any form of irrational politics. And that's why he came up with the coinage of the conspiracy theory in a book that he wrote in the last years of the Second World War, under the impression of fascism, actually. In that sense, it's very modern. But on the other hand, maybe if something is literally a conspiracy theory, there are conspiracies. And let's just take one example. Let's take, for example, what has been known about Eastern European secret services after the Cold War. And we only know it because the archives were opened. And we know what those conspiracies actually were. So conspiracies happen. Maybe I can tell you a conspiracy from my own background. I grew up in Berlin. And if you're a Berliner or a German, then the 1968 student movement actually began with a tragic death of a student in a demonstration against the Persian Shah in 1967 in Berlin. And he was killed by a policeman. He was shot by a policeman. Now, it was known back then that this police officer was on the extreme right and that he was a gun freak. Now, we also know, after the end of the Cold War, that he was a double agent for the Stasi and a member of the East German Communist Party, right? I mean, if anybody had told me before 1989 that this police officer had been a Stasi spy, even I would say, no, this is fucking crazy. This is batshit crazy as a conspiracy theory. So very often you see, conspiracies exist. Right? Conspiracy theories can actually be very useful critical tools if it is a theory that is properly developed, that has a proper argumentation, has proper research on it. For example, we have the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump, and by the way, also likely Thierry Baudet, is a pawn of the Russian Secret Service, because they have materials against both of them, so they comply to Russian politics. That's very probable. There is good evidence for that, also in the behavior and the political decisions that those two politicians take. I think it's dangerous to then debunk it by saying, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. So what we should actually do, we should be more precise in our language. And I think this is where Karl Popper is problematic. We should differentiate conspiracy theories from conspiracy myths. So what we're actually talking about nowadays are conspiracy myths or even conspiracy mythologies, where it's actually stories that get made up and they get then sold as the truth or as fake news or whatever. But to think in conspiracies and to also develop something like an artistic strategy of conspiracies, I think it's very valid and has been done in the arts with lots of good outcomes.
Well, when I was younger, definitely. There was this conspiracy. Well, the one is really innocent. There was this conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney, the Beatles singer, was dead. And there was a time when I was about, I think, 14 or something, that I was interested in the Beatles. I listened to the music, the old records from my parents. And I read a lot about Paul McCartney not being dead, and there were all these clues supposed to be in the music and the images of the records, which would prove that Paul McCartney was actually very much alive. So I turned the album back to hear the messages in that. And so of course, sometimes I start doubting myself. When you hear conspiracy theorists talk, then you start thinking, well, how do I know for sure that I know the truth?
To me personally, I don't know. I mean, I have to say, I find all conspiracy theories pretty entertaining. And, you know, sometimes you read something and you think it's a conspiracy theory, but it'll confirm my own kind of political beliefs or my own dispositions, right? And then it has some appeal, right? There might be something that I don't believe in or I don't want to be the case, and I'll go and find a conspiracy theory and it might confirm something that I believe, right? And I think that's where it's really important. We need to take the responsibility to try to sort out what is untrue, what is conspiracy theory, and what we actually can believe and prove, right? And we have to be careful with that. And it's an individual responsibility, but we also have to think about there's big media structures that help to make these things spread too, right? So it's the individual and the structural and the collective that we need to think about.
Conspiracy theories oftentimes are, I mean, they are forms of creative expression and oftentimes are rather well done. So, I've read a lot of Russian conspiracy theories recently and doing a project on so-called Russian disinformation. And a lot of them are extremely well written, sort of, you know, well done cultural productions. These are, you know, multiple plot and actor entanglements, which I mean, normally, you know, there's some kind of plot, there's some sort of secret plot going on in secret. So there's something typical about them. So you know the genre, but they can also be really well done.
I'm a big fan and follower of conspiracy theories. I very much empathize with conspiracy theories, and I mostly see them as, let's say, wacky entertainment, and also something that is speculative, that allows you to critically think that, you know, another picture of the reality, another explanation of the reality can be possible. And I think that's actually a value, and it shouldn't be discredited. I would even say that this is a value in the problematic right-wing conspiracy theories that we have today, like QAnon. The impulse to say something is not right, and we question the mainstream narratives that we get by politics and the media, I think is, first of all, a good critical impulse. And also the impulse to radically question, and also to do that in a speculative and imaginative way. The problem is when you weaponize it. And I think that's something that I personally learned actually from watching Jackie Chan movies. You know, the particular, how do you say, the particular martial art of Jackie Chan is you can turn anything into a weapon. So if you're in a fight and, I don't know, there's a potato, you can turn the potato into a weapon. Or if there's a carpet, or there's actually very wonderful Jackie Chan movies where he rolls on the carpet and you can turn the carpet into a weapon. And that's actually the problem. If you take the conspiracy theory and you move it from a realm of speculation, of fiction, maybe also of philosophical reflection even. You know, what is our reality? Where do we live? Do we live in the Matrix? That's also what John Ruffman tells us. He tells us also a Alice in Wonderland story in the internet age. The problem is, for example, an alt-righter, or also some other conspiracy theory, an anti-vaxxer could, for example, take this John Ruffman video and weaponize it and turn it into an alt-right meme. That's absolutely possible, and that has always happened. That even happened with the Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, which originally was a political satirical novel, which then was turned into a conspiracy narrative and weaponized by Secret Service, actually.